G'day folks, welcome to this full playthrough of Intermediate Scenario 4.0 Canada. This is a 48-hour scenario. It runs from the morning of the 6th of June through to the evening of the 7th of June, focused on the landings of the 3rd Canadian Division at Juno Beach, their advance to the south, and then the counterattack by the 12th SS Panzer Division. This is an amazing scenario. I played this solo, but it would serve as a great two-player scenario because both players get the opportunity to sort of be on the attack and defence. There's a lot going on. It starts off with the Allied invasion, clearing the beaches, and then advancing through open terrain, trying to overcome isolated pockets of German defenders. Then the German reinforcements arrive at midnight on the 6th of June, and the tide turns. The Germans advance against these overstretched allies, and there's this back and forth throughout the line. It is a great scenario. It was very tense. It was a very close run. Let me run you through sort of what's been happening. Well, the initial invasion went pretty well. I lost 2 DD tanks and a step loss on, I think it was an infantry unit. But other than that, just a few scattered cohesion hits. The bulk of the infantry landing with pretty good strength, so I'm pretty happy about that. The 2 DDs that I did lost were due to the sea state. I rolled 2 6s in a row to eliminate 2 tanks in a row, which was frustrating, but we did land 2 others, one on the far left, the other on the far right. I focused on reducing obstacles to 3 quickly, and then bringing those nests down to about the same level. Once obstacles and nests were on about 3, I kind of was going, reducing them both equally, and then started to reduce the gaps. Opened our first gap on the very far left, in front of the DT tank, and then opened the second in front of Courcelles, and then the other gaps opened up pretty quickly thereafter. So the infantry started to funnel through these gaps, trying to get the engineers through those gaps to remove those minefields, trying to get the funnies in the same position. Generally pretty happy from the Allied perspective with how things were going. Those Wittgenstein nests were gradually reduced. Probably the most difficult one to take out is the 0-step Wittgenstein nest just at the back of Courcelles. It's hard to get a line of sight on that nest, and it was one of the last ones to be eliminated. But otherwise, the engineers landed healthily. We did lose a step loss on an engineer out in the far right, near Saint-Aubin-sur-Mer, due to that Wittgenstein nest. But yeah, otherwise, this initial landing went pretty well. Now, despite that, the last 1 or 2 Wittgenstein nests really held out, and throughout the 0900 turn and 1100 turn, I really struggled to clear this beach. Basically, you can't clear the overlay until you've eliminated all those Wittgenstein nests, or at least those ones that are, I think it's within 3 hexes of the reinforcement areas, and they're really problematic just to get those last few hits off. So armoured units had begun to sort of move around Courcelles. They were ready to drive down these roads, but they were just hanging around this beach overlay waiting for those last few steps. And in response, German infantry from the 716th decided to make this forward defence, and you can see how they've moved into Bernier-sur-Mer. They very quickly regret this decision. Their thinking here was that they could slow down the Allies on the overlay, on the beaches, try and stop them getting inland at all. But with these armoured units sort of flanking this whole position, you can see in this image here in the very bottom right of that beach overlay, one of those armoured units occupying this open terrain, being able to fire on these reinforcements as they're moving towards the beach. Now, learning from their mistake, Kampfgruppe Meyer and some other elements of, I think, 736, 716 out in the far left, you can see with the blue band, they decided just to hold short of the beaches and to try to form a defensive line in line with those kind of coastal batteries, the minefields out in the right, to block those roads heading south. And I think this was a better decision. They could have certainly pulled back further, but the idea here is forming a rough line, trying to get some support going for each of these units. The main problem I probably made at this mistake is not placing rear guards. It would have been a good opportunity to spend this time, and instead both sort of 716 and Kampfgruppe Meyer of the 12th SS Division were just kind of uncertain about what they were doing. There was some shuffling of units, and yeah, they didn't place rearguards just yet. This happens in just a moment. Now, once the beach is cleared, once the beach is open, it was a rush. You can see the armoured units rushing straight down the middle, trying to clear those centre roads. It's hard to see the units, but the red banded units of the 7th Canadian Brigade picked up a position out in the far left. They cleared that sort of Wittgenstein nest out along the beach to the left of Courcelles, and they saw these open roads to the left. So you can see a motorised or mechanised unit way down the bottom left near Cruelly. They have rapid movement, moving along these roads quite quickly, and they're just outflanking these positions. And the rest of the 7th Canadian Brigade follow that path to the west and then south, kind of along the map edge shortly thereafter, basically bypassing these positions. They leave the 9th Canadian Brigade, the yellow banded units, kind of to the centre left, just to the southwest of Courcelles, to clean up those, I think they're elements of the 716th Division that were sort of blocking those roads. The Armoured Brigade in the centre, as I said, and then the 8th Canadian Brigade, the green banded units out in the far right. They've been tasked with clearing up those minefields and trying to clear that road on the eastern edge of this sector. Now, these German fortified areas are quite a problem for the Allies throughout this day. It is, as I said, the 8th Canadian Brigade, the green banded units, were tasked with clearing up these positions around La Livarande out in the far east, and they've been struggling all day to get this done. They're bringing some funnies with them, bringing some engineers. There's a bit of an accident. I accidentally sent too many engineers out to the west with the 7th and 9th Brigades, and not enough with the 8th. This is just part of the chaos of getting off the beach. But certainly by mid-afternoon, the funnies and engineers had started to clear these mines around these positions, and we're starting to peg away, make some cohesion hits on these defenders. Now, the 7th Canadian Armoured Brigade in the centre did an outstanding job here. We have some Fireflies here, and they hit really hard. 6 troop quality rating, 7 firepower rating, typically firing with 9 firepower, and they made relatively short work of the defenders around Benny-sur-Mer. There was a unit in Bocage, just to the northeast of Benny-sur-Mer, which kind of held out. But what happened here is once they eliminated that unit out in the open, they simply moved through the open terrain to the west of Benny-sur-Mer and relinked on the roads and had open ground to the south. It was... I'll show you a map in a moment to indicate the path they took, but these armoured units rushed around Benny-sur-Mer and relinked up with the road and then rushed south towards that linking road in the south. Throughout this period, you can see the 7th Canadian Brigade moving in column down those roads on the far left. The 9th Brigade kind of held up not far from the beaches, trying to take care of those defenders in those isolated positions. Whilst out on the right, the 8th Canadian Brigade, again, slowly, this image shows it a bit better, how they're gradually wearing down and clearing out those minefields around those fortified areas to the east. Okay, so this image shows you the path taken. The blue line shows the path taken by that Canadian Armoured Brigade. They bypassed Benny-sur-Mer to the left through this open ground, relinked up at the road, and from that road they rushed down towards the airfield, that linking road, and kind of pushing Kampfgruppe to the left. Now those units there's only 3 units in that Kampfgruppe, including 1 infantry unit, and that 1 infantry unit, I've shown their path on this black line to show where they've rapidly moved to try to set up some rearguards on these roads to stop mainly that 7th Canadian Brigade's advance. And they've done, at this point, as soon as this 7th Canadian Brigade, the red banded units, reach these roadblocks, they are slowed down considerably. There's also these ranged armoured, 2 ranged armoured units in that Kampfgruppe, which also helps to slow them down. Unfortunately, on the sort of the top right in the centre of this image, they encountered a Firefly of that 7th Canadian Armoured Brigade, which is doing a lot of damage. But the key thing here is this is the red line indicates the effectively the front line, the extent of the Canadian advance at the end of the day, at the end of the 6th of June. And they've done very well out in that right. The 7th Canadian Armoured Brigade has rushed through. This is the Caen-Bayeux connecting road that they have now kind of touched on and crossed in places. They are just outside the airfield, which is the 2 clear objective hexes right in the bottom of the map. My main concern is they've rushed well ahead of the infantry. The infantry is kind of clearing up these pockets of German infantry behind the lines. It's taken them a whole day just to get to this point. And I'm worried now that there are a lot of 12th SS Panzer Division reinforcements coming on, that these armoured units are quite isolated, quite alone. There's not a lot of great defensive terrain out in. They've tried to pick up as much kind of key terrain as they can, but yeah, they're kind of feeling a bit lonely with this wave of German reinforcements coming on during the night turn. So what I'll do is compare this with the historic advance of the Canadian Division. Okay, so here you can see side by side the comparison between the historical Allied advance on the 6th of June and what has happened in this scenario. You can see it's almost on par out on the left where the 7th Canadian Brigade is. And in the centre, pretty much on par. But out on the right, they've done really well to break through, as I said, just to the southwest of Bény-sur-Mer, Basley, through Colombey-sur-Théon, and down to the south through Bouon, Roselle, and onto that road. Very close to Carpiquet airfield. It's just those German flak guns set up along that road that could have caused problems for the armoured units, and I didn't want to sort of take them on just yet. So, yeah, pretty happy with that advance. Pretty happy with that, that breakthrough out on the right. They did well to bypass that town. There's just a kind of a thin line of open terrain that they could move through. Barrage markers certainly helped. And yeah, once they relinked up with the road, they had a lot of free movement in that area. So this takes us then to the night turn on the 6th of June when those German reinforcements are arriving. Okay, so on the morning of the 7th of June, the arrival of those 12th SS Panzer Division reinforcements has an immediate impact. They lay straight into these advanced and rather isolated elements of the 2nd Canadian Armoured Brigade, and they do a lot of damage, step losses, some eliminations almost immediately. And they fan out over this broad front and begin pushing north. Now the 153rd Brigade of the 51st Division rushes down these roads to the southeast to try and help these armoured units. They're in column, moving as fast as they can. Elsewhere, the 7th Canadian Brigade continues to push down the far southwest, clearing the remnants of these defenders, German defenders, along the way. The 9th Canadian Brigade in the centre to the north is still held up with those isolated German units, whilst the 8th Canadian Brigade really struggles throughout this morning to clear out those 2 German fortified areas. Now the 12th SS Panzer Division and Kampfgruppe here in particular make short work of those elements of the 2nd Canadian Armoured, and they begin to rush very quickly towards the north. And they kind of catch the 153rd Brigade of the Highland Division off guard on this road, so they have to quickly fall out of column and cross some open ground to try and meet them. The German plan here is to sever that main east-west connecting road. It's one of the primary Allied objectives, and so the German plan here is to deny them their primary objective, try to smash through this 153rd Brigade, and maybe link up with those fortified areas which are holding out to the north. By this stage, this is around the 1100 turn on the 7th of June, the 7th Canadian Brigade out on the left have kind of cleared out more of these German defenders and are beginning to shift around. So as the German army units are advancing north, they're shifting out some infantry to their left and right to sort of protect their flanks. And you can see in this image the front line at around 1300 hours, so it's early afternoon. Kampfgruppe has sent out that infantry to their flanks, holding key positions sort of along crests and ridges, They've now met the 7th Canadian Brigade. The bottom right of this image, which is effectively southwest, there you can see 3 small pockets. It's around about this time that the 8th Canadian Brigade reduces the first of those German fortified areas in the top left of this image, which is the northeast. The commandos, the small commando reinforcements arriving on the left of this image, and they're going to link up with the other commandos to help out that 153rd, who are now being smashed by Kampfgruppe-Meyer's armoured units. There are, of course, behind these German lines, 3 isolated armoured units. There's one in the fortified area, which I think is the Abbey, the top right, and there are 2 others. Basically, the German armour has just bypassed them. They've moved forward, driving to the 153rd, trying to get to that connecting road. And by this stage, this is, again, about 1300 hours, they are just 2 kilometres away from that line. Now, they are driving through a pretty narrow gap. The 153rd quickly fell out of column and started to build improved positions pretty much where they were. Some of them caught out in the open. And they're not standing much of a chance against these hard-hitting German troops. They've got troop quality of 7, -3 armour rating, and a firepower of 6 on that dual-purpose row, so quite devastating. Some instant elimination hits on these 153rd infantry caught out in the open. It is a narrow corridor through which they're pushing. You can see German infantry pushing out to the left and the right to try to protect those flanks. Having said that, the 153rd aren't in any position to attack. They are not even moving at all. They are holding their ground, serving as sort of blocking, slowing down these panzers as they advance. Now, while all this is going on, by around the 1300 turn, the 7th Canadian Brigade has cleared out all those German defenders sort of on the west, and they begin to push to the east to confront the flanks of Kampfgruppe-Meyer. At around the same time, the 9th Canadian Brigade very quickly eliminates the last few of their defenders, and they slowly begin to make their way southeast to help out, whilst at around the same time, the 8th Canadian Brigade finally reduces the last fortification up in the northeast. And they also, you'll see in just a moment, they also begin to make their way. So almost simultaneously, around the 1300, 1500 turns, these 3 Canadian brigades reduce and eliminate the German defenders behind the lines, and they quickly use their roads, which are now free and open, to rush towards the 153rd Brigade to help them and stop that German advance. The net result is what you can see here. It's a huge condensing of all these Allied forces along this road. The commandos are being thrown into the front lines. We rush some funnies into the front lines. Even some organic artillery is pushed into the front line just to hold that connecting road. On the second last daylight turn of the 7th of June, the Allies begin with, I think it was the 8th or the 9th Brigade, with a lot of artillery support. And they got very lucky with their company checks and placed a series of heavy barrage markers on top of all those German units, thus all but disabling them. They are adjacent to the road now, the Germans. You can see where there's heavy barrage markers. There are these German strong tank units under those barrage markers, and they are desperately firing and assaulting into into those hexes. They just need to occupy one hex of that road. But the Allies are throwing everything here. These are some densely stacked hex. You have sometimes 2, 3 infantry companies, the occasional armoured unit, guns. They have a lot of mortars in this area. And you can see behind the lines there, this is the remnants of the 9th Canadian Brigade. Not the remnants, but the kind of those who are furthest to the northwest, making their way in column along the roads just to kind of look for any gaps that may appear or weaknesses in that line. So all throughout this turn, this is 1700, 1900, these German armoured squadrons, companies, I'm not sure what you call them, are hitting this line so hard with everything they've got. They're burning through their command points. They have artillery support, which hasn't taken effect yet. This is just, they got unlucky again. Once it gets to this situation, it's really like in Starkweather 6 Airborne. Whoever gets the first activation chit fires first, blinds their opponent, who then is in trouble and struggles to respond. Now, on that last daylight turn, as I said, the Germans threw everything at this line, but they were so densely packed that even causing quite a lot of hits, they could not break through. These Panzers aren't great at assaulting, but they gave it a go and failed. So ultimately, and there was little they could do during the night turn as well, same story. So by the end of the day, by the end of the scenario, the Allies held that connecting road, and I'll show it here. This is a side by side. On the left, you have that red, the sort of dark red line showing the connecting road, showing what they need to hold. They don't need to hold the far right of this line. So you can see out in the far right, an element of Kampfgruppe von Moltke has sort of jumped on part of that road. That's not part of the Allied victory conditions. Their conditions start about the 6th hex in, pushes out to the left, and they hold every hex of that road. There are, again, pockets of Allied infantry behind the lines. You've got 3 infantry units of the 153rd Brigade kind of in the centre. And further to the south, those armoured units held out against the infantry of Kampfgruppe Meyer. They kept pegging away. There's a lot of cohesion hits, some suppression on those Allied units, but they are quite tough armoured units. And German infantry just couldn't break through. Further to the south, the 7th Canadian Brigade did a great job in pushing through, capturing Pruton and Bessin, Bretteville, and just south of that railroad, Norrie and Bessin. So the Canadians are almost on par with where they were historically. They have captured Norrie and Bessin. They have captured in the centre where that blue line is the town of Ross. Further to the north, the Germans, I believe, hold Les Buissons, Caron. The drive of those panzers to the north has kind of pushed out the historical line closer to Basily, Colombey, Théon than it was historically. But yeah, again, very close to the on-par historical situation. In the wrap-up here, as I said, the Allies hold that connecting road. They also seize those 2 fortified areas. So they achieve their primary and their tertiary objectives. They failed to complete their secondary objective, which I think was the airfield. The Germans, unfortunately, failed to achieve any of their objectives. They were very close to some of them. They needed to capture some objectives out in the left, which they weren't really striving for. But the Allied armoured unit in that abbey denied the Germans one of their objectives. So, in sum, the Allies secure 21 victory points to the Germans 0. But it was a very, very close thing. The Germans are 1 hex away from denying the Allies 15 victory points. They are, very close. It's the other thing here is that the Germans have destroyed the 2nd Canadian Armoured Brigade, and they are all but spent as a force. So this is almost a Pyrrhic victory. Yes, the Allies have kind of advanced. They have seized some ground and have set themselves up for further advances, but it is at the cost of so many of their armoured units. So here you can see the casualty list. Of course, a lot of those 716 Infantry Division units, these are their strong points. There's initial defenders. Some elements of the 12th SS Panzer Division, but a lot of rear guards here. Their guns, which are quite vulnerable. No heavy armoured units were lost. And then out on the right, you can see the Allied losses. Some guns, but only one from the formations. Only one unit of the 7th Canadian Armoured Brigade was lost. You can, of course, see all those heavy losses from the 2nd Canadian Armoured Brigade. And this is quite devastating. If they were part of a larger campaign, the loss of those guns would be critical for the Allies. So yeah, there you go. That is O Canada Intermediate Scenario 4. It's a fascinating back and forth for both sides, and it was very, very close in the final run.